The sky turned dark in the middle of the day. 8-year-old Hannah looked up from the porch where she sat playing with her toys. Something huge was blocking the twin suns of her world. She squinted her eyes and saw it clearly now. A spaceship. But not a human spaceship. This one was black and covered with sharp edges, like a weapon made to fly. Hannah had never seen an alien ship before. She had heard stories from her grandfather Samuel. He always told her about the Galactic Dominion, the alien empire that ruled most of the galaxy. He said they were cruel and cold. He said they saw humans as weak creatures, good only for farming and paying tribute. But Hannah had never believed him fully. How could anyone be that mean? Now, watching the massive ship descend toward her small farming colony, she felt afraid for the first time in her young life. The colony was called New Haven. It sat on a quiet planet named Kepler 22b, far from Earth and far from help. About 300 humans lived here. They grew crops, raised animals, and lived simple lives. Hannah's father, David, worked in the wheat fields. Her mother, Grace, ran the small medical clinic. Her grandfather, Samuel, was retired now, but he still helped around the farm when his old bones allowed it. Beside Hannah on the porch lay Biscuit. He was a honey badger, a small but fierce animal from Earth. Samuel had brought him to this planet 20 years ago, when Biscuit was just a baby. Now the honey badger was old. His fur had turned gray around his face, and he moved slower than before. But his eyes were still sharp and bright. He feared nothing and no one. That was just how honey badgers were. Biscuit lifted his head and watched the alien ship land in the fields outside the colony. He let out a low growl. Hannah reached down and touched his rough fur. "It's okay, Biscuit," she whispered. But she did not believe her own words. The ship touched down with a loud boom. Dust and dirt flew everywhere. The crops in the nearby field were crushed flat under the weight of the vessel. Hannah saw her father and the other farmers running toward the town square. Her mother came out of the house behind her, face pale with worry. "Hannah, come inside," Grace said firmly. "What's happening, Mama?" "I don't know yet, but stay close to me." They walked together toward the town square, where everyone in the colony was gathering. Biscuit followed them slowly, his short legs carrying him along at his own pace. He would not be left behind. The alien ship opened its doors with a hiss of steam. Soldiers marched out in perfect lines. They were tall and covered in dark armor. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but Hannah could see their hands. They were not human hands. They had scales and claws, like lizards that walked on two legs. Behind the soldiers came their leader. He was even taller than the rest, nearly 8 feet high. He wore no helmet, and Hannah could see his face clearly. It was the face of a reptile. Cold yellow eyes, a mouth full of sharp teeth, scars running down one side of his snout. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight in his entire life. This was Captain Vorath of the Galactic Dominion Enforcement Fleet. He stopped in the center of the town square and looked around at the gathered humans. His yellow eyes moved slowly from face to face. He seemed bored. These humans were not interesting to him. They were just another group of weak creatures to be controlled. "People of New Haven," he said. His voice came out as a series of hisses and clicks, but a small device on his chest translated his words into English. "You have failed to meet your mineral tribute for 3 consecutive cycles. The Dominion does not accept failure." David stepped forward from the crowd. He was not a tall man, but he stood straight and looked directly at the alien captain. "We sent what we could," David said. "The mines have been running dry. We cannot give what we do not have." Vorath tilted his head, studying the human who dared to speak to him. A small smile crossed his reptilian face. It was not a friendly smile. "That is not my concern," Varth replied. The Dominion requires tribute. If you cannot pay in minerals, you will pay in another way. He raised one clawed hand and made a gesture. His soldiers began to move through the crowd, pushing people aside, looking at each person carefully. What are they doing? Grace whispered, pulling Hannah closer. Samuel pushed through the crowd to reach them. His old face was tight with anger. They're looking at the children, he said quietly. I've heard of this. When colonies can't pay, the Dominion takes the young ones. They sell them as servants across the empire. Grace's hand tightened on Hannah's shoulder until it hurt. They can't do that, she said. They can do whatever they want, Samuel replied bitterly. We have no weapons, no warships, no way to call for help. Out here, we're alone. Vorath walked through the crowd like a king walking among peasants. He stopped occasionally to look at a child. He would tilt their chin up with one claw and examine them like livestock in a market. The parents stood frozen, too afraid to move, too afraid to fight back. When he reached Hannah, he stopped. He looked down at the small girl with her dark hair and serious eyes. She stared back at him without blinking. This one has spirit, Varth said. She will fetch a good price. Grace stepped between them, her whole body shaking with fear but refusing to move. You will not touch my daughter. Varth laughed. It was a cold, hissing sound that made Hannah's skin crawl. You humans are amusing, he said. You think your feelings matter. You think your love can protect your children. It cannot. Nothing can protect you from the Dominion. He turned away and walked back to the center of the square. His soldiers gathered all the children under 12 years old and pushed them into a group near the ship. There were 17 children in total. 17 young humans, crying and confused, separated from their families. Hannah was among them. Grace screamed and tried to reach her, but soldiers held her back. David fought against 2 guards and received a blow to his head that knocked him to the ground. And through it all, Old Biscuit watched. The honey badger sat at the edge of the crowd, his gray fur dusty and his eyes cold. He watched the aliens hurt the humans he had lived with his entire life. He watched them make children cry and mothers scream. Something was building inside the old animal. Something ancient and fierce. Something that the aliens, in all their power and cruelty, had never encountered before. Biscuit began to move toward the center of the square. The town square had become a place of tears and fear. Children huddled together in a frightened group, while their parents stood helpless behind a wall of alien soldiers. The twin suns had moved past the shadow of the Dominion ship, casting harsh light across the scene. Everything felt too bright and too real. Hannah stood in the middle of the captured children. Her hands were shaking, but her face was calm. She had stopped crying after the first few minutes. Crying did not help. Crying did not change anything. Instead, she watched. She watched the alien soldiers with their scaled hands and cold weapons. She watched Captain Vorath as he spoke into a communication device, reporting his successful collection of human cargo. She watched Biscuit as he slowly made his way across the dusty ground toward them. No one else noticed the honey badger at first. He was small and gray and old. He walked with a slight limp from an injury he had gotten years ago while fighting a wild dog that had threatened Samuel's chickens. The dog had run away bleeding. Biscuit had simply returned to his spot on the porch and gone to sleep. That was the kind of creature he was. The honey badger moved past the legs of crying mothers and stunned fathers. He moved past the armored boots of alien soldiers who did not look down. He moved with purpose, heading straight for the group of captured children. One of the younger children, a boy named Peter, who was only 5 years old, saw Biscuit first. His crying stopped and a tiny smile crossed his face. Biscuit came, Peter whispered to Hannah. He came to help us. Hannah looked down at the old honey badger as he reached them. Biscuit sat down in front of the children and turned to face the aliens. His small body was positioned between the soldiers and the young humans. His gray fur bristled along his back, making him look slightly bigger than he actually was. It was such a small act of defiance. Such a tiny creature standing against an empire that controlled half the galaxy. But in that moment, it meant everything to the children behind him. Captain Vorath finished his communication and turned back to survey his prize. He noticed the honey badger immediately. The creature was directly in front of the children, growling softly at any soldier who came too close. "What is this?" Vorath asked, his translator hissing the words into English. The soldiers looked at each other, uncertain. They had never seen an animal like this before. Their home world had no mammals at all. They knew humans kept pets, but they had never understood why. What was the point of feeding and caring for a creature that could not work or fight? Hannah stepped forward, moving to stand just behind Biscuit. Her small hand reached down and touched the honey badger's rough fur. "His name is Biscuit," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "He's a honey badger. From Earth." Vorath walked closer, his heavy boots thudding against the hard ground. He was curious now. He had studied humans before his assignment to this sector. He knew they were weak and emotional. He knew they formed strange bonds with animals and treated them like family members. He had always found this amusing, a sign of how soft and foolish humans truly were. "A honey badger," Vorath repeated. He looked down at the small creature, his yellow eyes blinking slowly. "I have not heard of such a thing. Is it dangerous?" Some of the soldiers laughed at the question. The animal was so small. It barely reached the captain's knee. What danger could such a creature possibly pose? "Honey badgers are very dangerous," Hannah said seriously. "They're not afraid of anything. My grandfather says they fight lions and win. He says they're the bravest animals on Earth." Vorath smiled his cold reptilian smile. The idea was ridiculous to him. He had conquered worlds. He had killed warriors twice his size. He had stood before the Dominion Council and received medals for his cruelty. And this tiny human child was telling him to be afraid of a small gray animal? "Brave," Vorath said slowly, tasting the word. "Your planet has a strange definition of bravery. On my world, bravery means strength, power, the ability to destroy your enemies. This creature has none of these things." He reached down with one clawed hand to push the honey badger aside, to show the watching humans how little their brave animal mattered against the might of the Dominion. Biscuit bit him. The honey badger's jaws clamped down on Vorath's hand with shocking speed. The captain felt teeth sink through his scales and into the flesh beneath. He roared in surprise and pain, a sound that echoed across the silent square. He shook his hand violently, trying to throw the creature off. But honey badgers do not let go. Their jaws lock in place when they bite. Biscuit hung on, his small body swinging through the air, his teeth grinding deeper into the alien's hand. Vorath finally managed to tear the animal free. He threw Biscuit away with all his strength, sending the honey badger flying across the square. The old creature hit the ground hard and rolled through the dust. He lay still, a small gray lump in the dirt. The square was completely silent. Even the crying children had stopped making sounds. Everyone stared at the motionless body of the honey badger. Grace let out a sob from behind the line of soldiers. Samuel's face had gone white with grief. David, still on the ground where he'd been knocked down earlier, pushed himself up onto his knees and stared at Biscuit's body. Vorath looked at his injured hand. Purple blood dripped from the deep bite wounds. His scales were torn and ragged. The pain was intense, more than he had expected from such a small creature. "Foolish animal," he hissed. Then he heard Hannah's voice. The girl had not moved. She stood exactly where she had been standing before, her dark eyes fixed on Captain Vorath's face. There was no fear in her expression now, There was something else, something that made even the alien captain feel a tiny bit uncomfortable. "You've doomed yourself," Hana whispered. Vorath stared at the child. His injured hand throbbed with pain. His soldiers stood frozen around him, waiting for orders. "What did you say?" he demanded. Hana pointed at Biscuit's motionless body. "You heard him," she said simply. "You heard our honey badger. Now the humans will come. And they won't stop until you're dead." The captain laughed. It was a harsh sound full of disbelief. "Humans? Come here? There are no human warships within 100 light years of this miserable colony. No one is coming to save you, little girl. No one is coming to avenge your pathetic pet." Hana said nothing. She just smiled a small, strange smile that looked wrong on such a young face. And then, behind her, Biscuit began to move. Biscuit rose from the dust like something out of a nightmare. The old honey badger shook his gray body once, twice, sending clouds of dirt flying from his fur. He seemed unhurt. He seemed unafraid. He seemed absolutely furious. Captain Vorath watched with disbelief as the creature he had thrown across the square simply stood up and began walking toward him again. This was impossible. The force of that throw should have killed any small animal instantly. The captain had broken the spines of larger beasts with less effort, but honey badgers are not like other animals. Their skin is thick and loose, able to absorb impacts that would destroy other creatures. Their bodies are built for survival. They have fought cobras, lions, leopards, and hyenas throughout millions of years of evolution. They have been bitten, clawed, and thrown. And they have always gotten back up. Biscuit's dark eyes locked onto Vorath. The honey badger remembered the clawed hand that had grabbed him. He remembered being thrown through the air. He remembered the hard landing in the dirt. And now he was going to make the creature who had done this to him pay for it. The colonists of New Haven watched in stunned silence as their old pet began his attack. Biscuit moved faster than seemed possible for his age. He covered the distance between himself and the captain in seconds. "Shoot it!" Vorath screamed at his soldiers, but they were too slow. By the time they raised their weapons, Biscuit had already reached the captain's leg. The honey badger's jaws clamped down on the back of Vorath's knee, biting through the thin scales and into the soft flesh beneath. Vorath screamed. It was a high, terrible sound, unlike anything his species had made in thousands of years. The Dominion had conquered half the galaxy. They had broken entire civilizations. They did not scream like frightened children, but Vorath was screaming now. He tried to kick the honey badger away, but Biscuit's loose skin twisted around the captain's claws without tearing. The more Vorath struggled, the deeper Biscuit's teeth sank into his leg. The soldiers aimed their plasma rifles at the honey badger, but they couldn't fire without hitting their captain. They moved closer, trying to find a clear shot, trying to figure out how to handle a situation they had never trained for. And in that moment of confusion, the colonists of New Haven finally understood something important. They understood that the aliens were not unbeatable. They understood that fear and pain could affect even the most powerful enemy. They understood that if a small old honey badger could make Captain Vorath scream, then maybe humans could fight back too. David moved first. He had been knocked down earlier, but now he rose to his feet with new energy. He grabbed a metal farming tool from the ground and swung it at the nearest soldier. The impact knocked the alien's helmet off, revealing a surprised reptilian face beneath. Grace broke free from the soldiers holding her and ran toward the captured children. She grabbed Hana and pulled her away from the chaos, screaming for the other children to run with her. Samuel, despite his old age and weak bones, threw himself at a soldier who was trying to aim at Biscuit. The two of them fell to the ground, struggling for control of the plasma rifle. All across the square, colonists began to fight. They had no weapons except farming tools and their bare hands. They had no training except years of hard work in the fields. But they had something the Dominion had never understood about humans. They had the fierce, desperate courage of parents protecting their children. The battle was short and brutal. 3 colonists died in the first minute, cut down by plasma fire. But 6 soldiers also fell, overwhelmed by the sheer number of humans attacking them. The aliens were better armed, but they were outnumbered and confused. Their commander was rolling on the ground, still trying to tear a honey badger from his leg. Samuel finally managed to get control of a plasma rifle. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but his hands were steady. He fired twice, and 2 more soldiers dropped. David led a group of farmers against the remaining aliens. They used their tools like weapons, swinging and stabbing with desperate strength. It was ugly and brutal, nothing like the clean battles shown in entertainment videos. It was real fighting, the kind where you could smell blood and hear bones break dot in the middle of it all. Biscuit finally released Captain Vorath's leg. The honey badger stepped back and looked at his work. The captain's leg was badly damaged, purple blood pouring from deep wounds. Vorath could barely stand, let alone fight. The remaining soldiers saw their captain fall to his knees. They saw their comrades lying dead in the dust. They saw the human colonists coming toward them with murder in their eyes. They ran. 8 soldiers made it back to the ship. The doors slammed shut behind them, and the engines began to power up. They were going to escape, to call for reinforcements, to come back with more ships and more soldiers, and burn this colony to ashes. But Grace had reached the communication tower at the edge of town. She was a medical worker, not a technical expert, but she knew how to send a basic distress signal. Her fingers flew across the controls as she activated the emergency beacon. The signal was simple. It contained only the colony's location and 3 words that would change everything. Children in danger. The message shot out into space at the speed of light. It bounced off relay stations and communication satellites. It traveled through hyperspace corridors and crossed impossible distances in seconds. It reached Earth in less than 4 minutes. Back in the square, the colonists gathered around Captain Vorath. The alien captain was lying on the ground, too injured to move. His yellow eyes looked up at the humans surrounding him with something he had never felt before. Fear. Hannah walked through the crowd until she stood directly above the captain. Biscuit limped to her side, his gray fur now stained with purple alien blood. "I told you," Hannah said quietly. "I told you that you doomed yourself." Vorath tried to laugh, but it came out as a pained gasp. "Your signal is worthless," he said. "Human warships cannot reach this sector in time. My soldiers will call for reinforcements. A Dominion battle fleet will be here within hours. You have won nothing, little human. You have only made your deaths more painful." Hannah shook her head slowly. She reached down and picked up Biscuit, holding the old honey badger gently in her arms. "You don't understand," she said. "You think we're alone out here. You think no one cares about a little farming colony on the edge of nowhere. But you're wrong. Humans always come when children are in danger. Humans always avenge the ones they love." She looked up at the sky, where the Dominion ship was rising into the atmosphere. "And you heard our honey badger," she added. "That was your biggest mistake." Far away, in a classified military base orbiting Mars, Admiral Thomas Park received the distress signal from New Haven. He read the 3 words on his screen. He looked at the coordinates. Then he began giving orders. Within 1 hour, the fastest warship in the United Earth Fleet was on its way. Admiral Thomas Park stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched the stars streak past the observation windows. The ship was traveling through hyperspace at speeds that would have seemed impossible just 50 years ago. But humans had learned fast. When you were a young species surrounded by ancient empires that saw you as nothing more than servants and slaves, you learned very fast indeed. The Admiral was a man in his 60s, with gray hair cut short and a face that rarely showed emotion. He had commanded warships for 30 years. He had fought pirates, rebels, and alien raiders. He had seen terrible things and done terrible things in defense of humanity. But when he had received the distress signal from New Haven, something cold had settled in his stomach. 3 words. Children in danger. Those words could wake any human from the deepest sleep and send them running into battle. The retribution was not supposed to exist. Officially, the United Earth Fleet had no Dreadnought-class warships. The treaty with the Galactic Dominion forbade humanity from building vessels above a certain size. The Dominion believed that humans had obeyed this treaty. They believed that Earth's military consisted of small patrol ships and aging cruisers. They believed wrong. The retribution was 2 kilometers long. It carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It had been built in secret in a hidden shipyard behind the orbit of Neptune, where Dominion sensors could not reach. 3 more ships like it were being completed at this very moment. Humanity had been preparing for war for a long time. They had just been waiting for the right moment. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Emma Ross from her station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Dominion vessel Iron Mandate. They're ordering us to identify ourselves and state our intentions." Park smiled slightly. It was not a friendly smile. "Open a channel," he said. The main screen flickered and showed the interior of the Dominion ship. Captain Varth sat in the command chair, his injured leg wrapped in medical bandages. His yellow eyes widened when he saw the human admiral. "This is Admiral Thomas Park of the United Earth Fleet Dreadnought Retribution," Park said calmly. "You have attacked a human colony. You have threatened human children. You have struck our honey badger." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Surrender now, or we will destroy you." Voreth's shock quickly turned to anger. His reptilian face twisted into a snarl. "You dare threaten a captain of the Galactic Dominion? You dare bring a warship into restricted space? This is a violation of every treaty between our peoples. The Dominion will crush your pathetic planet for this insult." Admiral Park leaned back in his chair. "You have 30 seconds to surrender." "We have already called for reinforcements," Voreth said. "A battle fleet is on its way. You cannot win against the full might of the Dominion. Retreat now, human, and perhaps we will show mercy." 20 seconds. Voreth laughed his cold, hissing laugh. "You are insane. Your ship is impressive, I admit, but one vessel cannot defeat an empire. When the fleet arrives, they will— 10 seconds. The captain's laugh died in his throat. He saw something in the Admiral's eyes. Something that told him this human was not bluffing. This human had come here to kill. 5 seconds, Park said quietly. Varth made his choice. He turned to his crew and screamed orders in his native language. The Iron Mandate's weapons began to power up. Shields activated. The ship turned to face the human dreadnought. "Time's up," Admiral Park said. He nodded to his weapons officer. "Lieutenant Ross, destroy them." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The UES Retribution unleashed a barrage of weapons that the Dominion had never seen before. Plasma cannons that fired in rapid bursts. Missile swarms that moved like living things, adjusting their paths to avoid point defense fire. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds that punched through shields like paper. The Iron Mandate never stood a chance. The Dominion ship was advanced by their standards, but it had been designed to fight enemies that followed the old rules of galactic warfare. It was not prepared for an enemy that had spent decades secretly developing new weapons and new strategies. The battle lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. When it was over, the Iron Mandate was nothing but scattered debris floating in the void. 2 Dominion escort ships that had accompanied the Iron Mandate tried to flee. They jumped to hyperspace before the retribution could destroy them. Park let them go. He wanted them to escape. He wanted them to carry the story of what they had witnessed back to the heart of the Dominion. He wanted the entire galaxy to know what happened when you threatened human children. The retribution descended into the atmosphere of Kepler 22b and landed in the fields outside New Haven. Admiral Park himself walked down the ramp and into the colony, followed by a squad of armored Marines. The colonists gathered around them, still shocked by everything that had happened. Some were crying with relief. Others just stared at the massive warship that had saved them. David stepped forward, his clothes still stained with alien blood from the battle in the square. "How did you get here so fast?" he asked. "The signal only went out a few hours ago." Park looked around at the colony, at the damaged buildings and the bodies being carried away, at the children huddled together, still frightened but safe, at the old honey badger sitting calmly beside a dark-haired girl. "We were closer than you think," Park said. "We've had ships waiting in hidden positions throughout the frontier. We've been preparing for this moment for a long time." He paused. "We knew the Dominion would eventually go too far. We just had to wait for the right time to show them what humanity can really do." Grace came forward, carrying medical supplies. "There will be consequences," she said. "The Dominion won't just accept this. They'll send more ships. They'll come for revenge." Park nodded. "Yes, they will. And we'll be ready for them." He looked up at the sky, where the twin suns were setting in brilliant colors of orange and purple. The Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. They've forgotten what it feels like to be afraid. They've forgotten that new species can rise and old empires can fall. He turned back to the colonists with a fierce light in his eyes. Today, they started remembering. From behind David's legs, Hannah emerged. She was still holding Biscuit, who had fallen asleep in her arms after all the excitement. The old honey badger looked peaceful now, his gray fur rising and falling with each breath. "Admiral," Hannah said seriously, "will you make them pay for hurting Biscuit?" Thomas Park looked at the small girl and her sleeping pet. For a moment, his hard face softened. "Little one," he said, "by the time we're done, the whole galaxy will know never to mess with a human's honey badger." Hannah smiled. It was the first real smile she had made all day, somewhere in the depths of space. The two surviving Dominion ships raced toward their home world, carrying footage and reports of the impossible battle they had witnessed. The news would spread like fire through dry grass. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was not the weak, emotional species they had believed. Humanity was something much more dangerous. Humanity was a species that protected what they loved, no matter the cost, and the Dominion had just hurt their honey badger. 20 years had passed since the day Captain Vorath made his fatal mistake. The galaxy had changed more in those 2 decades than it had in the previous 10,000 years. Empires that seemed eternal had crumbled. Species that had been slaves for generations now walked free. And at the center of all this change stood humanity. Ambassador Hannah Park stood at the window of her office on Earth's diplomatic station, looking out at the stars. She was 28 years old now, a tall woman with the same dark hair and serious eyes she had possessed as a child. Behind her desk hung a painting of New Haven as it looked today, rebuilt and thriving, surrounded by fields of golden wheat under twin suns, and beside her desk, sleeping on a soft cushion, lay a honey badger named Biscuit III. The original Biscuit had lived for 12 more years after the battle. He had become the most famous animal in human space, maybe in the entire galaxy. News stations ran stories about him. Children on 100 worlds knew his name. When he finally died of old age, his body had been preserved and placed in a museum on Earth, where millions of visitors came to see the small gray creature that had started a revolution. His descendants now lived across human space. Hannah had kept one with her always, a reminder of what had started everything. A soft knock came at her door. Hannah turned as her assistant entered. "Ambassador, the Refugee Coalition delegation has arrived. They're waiting in the conference room." Hannah nodded and walked toward the door. The Refugee Coalition was an alliance of species that had once been enslaved by the Galactic Dominion. When the Dominion fell, these species had nowhere to go and no one to protect them. Humanity had offered them shelter, aid, and alliance. Now, they were some of Earth's closest friends. The conference room was filled with beings from a dozen different worlds. Some had scales, some had fur, some had bodies that didn't follow any pattern Hannah recognized. But they all rose respectfully when she entered. They all looked at her with gratitude in their various eyes. "Ambassador Park," said the lead delegate, a small feathered being named Kira, who spoke for the coalition. "Thank you for meeting with us." Hannah took her seat at the head of the table. "Of course. What can I do for you?" Kira reached into a bag and pulled out a small package wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal a metal plaque with writing in multiple languages. "We have created this to honor your people," Kira said. "It will be placed in every coalition city, in every school, and every public square. We want our children and our children's children to remember what humanity did for us." She handed the plaque to Hannah, the ambassador. "Read the words engraved on its surface. Fear not thee. Worship. Fear not the weapon. Fear. The species that will burn empires for a child's." Hannah felt tears form in her eyes. She blinked them away and looked up at the assembled delegates. "We didn't do it for glory," she said softly. "We didn't do it to build an empire of our own. We did it because it was right. Because no one should have their children taken. Because no one should be a slave." An elderly delegate from a species called the Vorn rose to speak. His people had been among the first to be freed when the Dominion collapsed. "We have studied your history," he said. "We have learned about your wars, your cruelty, your mistakes. We know humans are not perfect. But we also learned about your capacity for love, your willingness to die for strangers, your stubborn refusal to accept injustice." He paused, his ancient eyes shining. "The Dominion ruled through fear. They made others afraid of them. But humans? Humans make others afraid for them. For the children they protect. For the friends they defend. For the small creatures they love." He bowed his head in respect. "You are a strange species, Ambassador Park, and the galaxy is better for it." After the meeting, Hannah returned to her office. She sat at her desk and looked at the plaque the coalition had given her. She thought about the day when Captain Varoth had landed his ship in New Haven. She thought about her mother's fear and her father's courage. She thought about Grandfather Samuel, who had passed away 5 years ago, surrounded by family and friends and one very old honey badger. Most of all, she thought about Biscuit. Not the famous symbol. Not the legend. Just the old gray animal who had refused to let anyone hurt the children he had watched grow up. A reporter had once asked her what lesson people should take from the story of New Haven. Hannah had thought for a long time before answering. Captain Varoth thought. He was dealing with farmers, she had said finally. He didn't realize he was dealing with humans. There's a difference. Farmers grow things. Humans, we protect them. The quote had spread across the galaxy. It appeared in history books and news articles and speeches. But Hannah knew it was only part of the truth. The full truth was simpler and more powerful. Humans loved. That was their greatest strength and their most dangerous trait. They loved their children and their parents and their friends. They loved their homes and their communities. They loved their pets, even small gray animals that no alien could understand. And when something threatened what they loved, They became unstoppable. Biscuit the Third woke from his nap and waddled over to Hana's chair. She reached down and lifted him onto her lap, stroking his soft fur. "You know," she said to the honey badger, "the Dominion had warships and soldiers and 10,000 years of conquering the galaxy. They had technology we couldn't match and numbers we couldn't fight. They thought they were invincible." Biscuit looked up at her with small, dark eyes, listening in the way honey badgers always seem to listen. "But they made one mistake," Hana continued. "They thought being powerful meant they couldn't lose. They forgot that even the strongest empire can fall when it fights an enemy that refuses to give up." She looked out the window at the stars, at the galaxy that humanity now helped to lead. Somewhere out there, on a frontier world called Kepler 22b, our parents still lived on the farm where she had grown up. Somewhere out there, the descendants of freed slaves were building new lives. Somewhere out there, young beings of every species were learning the story of a small honey badger who had changed history. "Never strike the honey badger," Hana whispered Dot. It had become a proverb now, spoken in 1,000 languages across 1,000 worlds. It meant more than just the literal words. It meant, be careful what you threaten. It meant, small things can have great protectors. It meant, you never know what will wake the sleeping giant. Most of all, it meant, humans will come. Biscuit made a small sound, almost like agreement, and settled more comfortably in her lap. Outside the window, ships from 12 different species flew past, trading and traveling and living in peace. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still problems, still conflicts, still work to be done. But it was better than it had been under the Dominion. It was freer. It was kinder, Dot, and at the heart of it all was a simple truth that Captain Vareth had learned too late. There is no force in the universe more powerful than love. Not the soft, weak emotion that aliens had mistaken it for. Real love. Fierce love. The kind of love that makes parents lift impossible weights to save their children. The kind of love that makes soldiers run into fire to save their friends. The kind of love that makes an old honey badger stand between an alien army and a group of frightened children. The kind of love that burns empires.